The hottest take going around online right now is that American aircraft carriers are essentially giant floating targets that are obsolete in today's long-range precision missile age. And yet the fact remains, there is no other military capability that can match what an aircraft carrier brings to the table. The U.S. Navy's Gerald R. Ford class aircraft carrier is the largest and most expensive naval shipbuilding project in the entire world, maybe in human history. It took 13 years and $13.3 billion to build the first of its class CVN-78, also named Gerald R. Ford. For context, it was 6 times faster and cheaper to construct Noah's Ark. This massive investment in time and taxpayer funding naturally turned the Ford into a magnet for criticism and doubt from Reddit commenters to military experts themselves. Its price tag and size prompts the obvious question, is the aircraft carrier worth the money today? I actually spoke with a former US Navy nuclear reactor electrician, Augie, who deployed in an aircraft carrier to the Gulf, about why they're one of the safest places to be in the military. In this video, I'm going to show you both sides of the argument, and by the end, I guarantee you'll understand why the Navy believes aircraft carriers are not obsolete. First, I want to tell you about this episode's sponsor, Rocket Money. As most of you know, getting out of the military usually means taking on a lot more responsibility when it comes to managing our money. Not getting those bi-weekly paychecks could make things like saving for a home a lot more complicated. Life can get expensive, and Rocket Money is here to help. It's an all-in-one finance platform that helps you save more and spend less by allowing you to manage subscriptions, lower bills, build a custom budget, and grow your savings all in one place. I'm using Rocket Money to cancel unwanted subscriptions without ever having to ring up an operator, and besides that, it's great to set budgets to automatically monitor your spending with notification alerts and reports, and it'll even negotiate bills for you to get those phone and internet payments down as low as possible. Join the 3.4 million members using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/taskandpurpose or click the link in the description to get started for free. That's rocketmoney.com/taskandpurpose to get started for free. Supercarrier projects like this consistently draw bipartisan support in Congress because of the high number of jobs that they create in districts across the United States. While creating jobs is a good thing, critics are concerned that these projects have lost focus on what's most important. Is the goal to create domestic jobs or create effective weapons of war? I mean, let's be honest, the aircraft carrier concept is now over 100 years old. Threats like China's anti-ship cruise missiles and anti-ship ballistic missiles are what's making some analysts argue for a smaller, more decentralized fleet. Take a look at these satellite images that show just how obsessed China is with building a weapon that can sink our carriers. These detailed targets clearly are a Chinese representation of the new Ford-class carrier, kind of like taping a picture of your ex on a dartboard. Analysis by H.I. Sutton even shows a railroad capable of supporting a moving target for Chinese scientists to refine the tracking software for their anti-carrier missile program. The US Navy's new aircraft carrier can reach speeds of up to 30 knots, or about 55 kilometers per hour. That might sound like a casual Sunday drive to you, but it's very difficult and complicated to hit targets with a guided missile that are moving at that speed, especially when they're taking evasive maneuvers. The range of China's ballistic missiles, like the DF-26, makes them capable of hitting targets within both the first and second island chains. This means that the ports in Japan, Guam, Singapore, and the Philippines are all vulnerable to attack from mainland Chinese missile batteries. The DF-21D has a shorter range of 2,150 kilometers, but it's known infamously as the quote-unquote carrier killer, specifically designed to hit and disable US carriers. The YJ-21 is a hypersonic anti-ship missile capable of being launched at sea from a Type 55 cruiser and reaching speeds of Mach 10. It's colloquially named Eagle Strike 21, as in striking the American eagle, aka America's carriers. This shows how determined China is to develop weapons to specifically counter the carrier. It's like if we named a cruise missile the Winnie the Pooh Annihilator. This is the Russian flagship Damaska, struck by a Ukrainian drone ship in April 2022. Its destruction cost the Russian Navy approximately $750 million in damages. The conflict in Ukraine has proven the asymmetric effects of small drones on large, modern military targets, both in the air and on the sea. Coincidentally, China is also the world's leading exporter of combat drones in 2023. On top of becoming more vulnerable to missiles and drone attacks, critics also point to advantages in surveillance and reconnaissance that make carriers easier to spot and track. China's Yoghan satellites are the primary satellite surveillance devices for the Chinese military. While it's not known exactly how many are currently in operation, this year's China State Space Company plans to put 200 satellites in orbit. According to Wikipedia, these satellites use optical reconnaissance, synthetic aperture radar, and electro-intelligence for maritime surveillance. While these surveillance methods are capable of spotting and tracking carriers from space, they're not perfect. Advances in electronic warfare help control the Ford's electronic signature, and something as simple as bad weather can obscure optical and SAR surveillance enough to lose sight of a carrier. Another important note is that even though these satellites can see a carrier from space, there's a limited range of high-quality imagery. This means they have to know where in the ocean to look. To make up for these gaps, China also employs spy balloons, drones, aircraft, as well as the world's largest fleet of fishing vessels that make up a compulsory state maritime militia. Critics argue that these developments in carrier-killing weapons and surveillance makes carriers too vulnerable for practical use against China. China only needs one lucky shot to sink a multi-billion-dollar vessel, carrying billions more in aircraft, alongside 4,500 crew. To put this into perspective, losing a single Ford-class carrier would mean more deaths than those suffered on 9/11. Some argue their vulnerability would mean keeping them too far away from the fight to be effective in an effort to protect them. Despite these challenges though, the carrier persists as the most expensive shipbuilding project in US naval history. This is Newport News Shipbuilding that you're looking at right now. It's only a few minutes drive north of Virginia Beach. Newport News Shipbuilding is the only shipyard in America that's able to build aircraft carriers. Visit it on Google Maps right now, and you can see two of the new Ford-class carriers under construction at the pier. These are most likely the John F. Kennedy and Enterprise, scheduled for commissioning in 2025 and 2028, each costing around $9 billion to build. In response to the high costs, the US Navy asserts that 600 fewer crew members are required, and less required maintenance will save the DoD an estimated $4 billion in operating costs over each carrier's 50-year lifespan. But justifying a $13 billion project that could save you $4 billion in the future is kind of like telling your wife you need to buy that red Lambo today to save money on bus tickets tomorrow.
The biggest reason why I feel like aircraft carriers existed from my own experience is that we show our force everywhere in the world. If someone asks me, like, what's the biggest difference between the Navy and all the other branches? The Navy almost exclusively is designed to do what it does for people to see it. You know, think about what the SEALs do versus what the Green Berets do. You never hear about what the Green Berets are doing, but what the SEALs do is always on the news. Overnight, that thing could be pretty much anywhere with all the carriers that we have stationed around the world.
Take a look at this propeller. It's one of the four that power the USS Ford. 30 tons and made of solid bronze, Huntington Ingalls Industry, HII, took 10 months installing it under the hull. HII is the only company that builds America's aircraft carriers, but it doesn't build them alone. HII's website reports spending $1 billion across 2,000 US suppliers in nearly every state in America, nearly half of which are small businesses. This means that over 5 years of building the Gerald R. Ford, approximately $5 billion of taxpayer money is filtered through Huntington Ingalls Industries and back into the US economy, creating jobs and moving the money around and around, just like the propeller pushing the American economy forward.
The money keeps moving in a circle.
In January of 2019, HII received $15.2 billion contract modification for building those two carriers that you saw on Google Maps. Here, it's important to understand those developing Ford-class carriers aren't working in a vacuum. New developments on the Ford prove that project managers and engineers are well aware of the challenges and threats facing carriers.
When you're in port, you're considered more at risk when you're in the Navy. You have to disseminate all your stuff, and you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket sitting there, like, you know, ready to get attacked. So with an aircraft carrier, you fly food aboard. We need all of the JP-5 jet fuel for the jets. Basically, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier could go out to sea indefinitely. It could go out to sea for 25 years. It doesn't need to refuel. That, operationally speaking, is very, very beneficial, and it's one of the big reasons why our Navy and why our military is so powerful. We have aircraft carriers positioned all around the world that have 6,000 people on board.
As a result, these new carriers are a lot harder to kill than you might think. All new Ford-class carriers come equipped with the RIM-162 Evolved Sea Sparrow missile. Designed and manufactured by Raytheon, this medium-range missile is built to intercept China's most advanced anti-ship missiles. It can engage a wide variety of missiles as well as land, sea, and air targets. Its most notable feature is its sea-skimming ability, allowing it to intercept low-flying missiles just above the water. The ESSM saw actual combat deployment off the shores of Yemen in 2016 and is part of a maritime missile intercept program that's been ongoing since the 1950s. There are 3 to 4 20mm Vulcan Phalanx Sea Whiz guns positioned around the ship that can shoot down incoming missiles.
I'm completely and mentally stable. Oh, hey, look, a civilian airliner. Do it. Just lock onto that civilian airliner. Come on, just do it.
A combination of advanced arresting gear and electromagnetic air launch systems give the Ford the ability to scale its aircraft launch system to minimize stress on the airframe of various sizes. This is critical for keeping up with advances in fifth-generation aircraft and the adoption of unmanned platforms. In comparison, China's carriers can't currently support their newest fighter, the J-20, and they have to rely on the J-15. That's like 5 whole J's lower in combat effectiveness. This is a capability normal aircraft carriers don't have. This electromagnetic system uses stored kinetic energy to launch with reduced stress on the airframe, increasing service life. It's had over 8,000 successful launches so far, and it's an important reason as to why aircraft carriers are more survivable today than ever before. Aside from the lower demand for maintenance and higher sortie rate that the emails give the new Ford-class carrier, it can also launch lightweight UAVs like the MQ-25 Stingray. This platform is a game changer for air power projection, an unmanned, stealthy refueling platform that'll give aircraft extended range to strike targets deep inside of contested areas. And the whole reason for that is because the emails system allows you to launch lighter weight aircraft. In 2005, the RAND Corporation identified insufficient power generation as one of the biggest drawbacks of the Nimitz-class carrier. Developers for the Ford-class carriers heard this and decided to take the Nimitz nuclear reactor and literally double it. As a result, the Ford can produce 3 times the electrical output of its predecessor. There's so much energy that, unlike the Nimitz class that relied on steam lines, the Ford uses all electric lines, lowering maintenance costs and increasing corrosion control. This excess power also gives the Ford the energy it needs to power direct energy weapons and the potential for electric reactive armor. Nuclear generators also power improved radar and sensors to give the Ford a clearer and farther operational picture than ever before. Raytheon's dual-band radar, originally developed for the Zumwalt-class destroyer, gives the Ford further range with less antennas. This translates to a lower electronic signature and fewer moving parts that require maintenance. S-band volume search radar, VSR, also hot swapped from the Zumwalt project, which was seen as a failure, gives the Ford increased ability to search and track targets through inclement weather. Lower crew requirements allow the Ford to maintain better berthing conditions for their sailors. This is according to Wikipedia, who cites a Bloomberg report that I'm way too cheap to pay for. Get that paywall out of here. Quote, the massive 180-man berthing areas on the Nimitz class are replaced by 40-rack berthing areas on the Gerald R. Ford class carriers. The smaller berthing are quieter and layout requires less foot traffic through other spaces. Unfortunately, some of these crew perks came along with some unexpected pitfalls. Narrow pipes cause major plumbing issues. How major? Try $400,000 per flush. Unexpected costs on the Ford are nearly double the next most expensive project by billions. But let me ask you this, can you put a price on the ability to topple nations? A single Ford-class carrier has the capacity to hold over 70 combat aircraft. That's more than the size of the entire Air Force of all these different countries. And we want to build 11 of these aircraft carriers. That's an insane amount of power projection.
We go through the Strait of Gibraltar, we get into the Persian Gulf, and we're sending planes to protect you guys in Iraq and Afghanistan. So that's the mission for about 6 months. What happens is the ship is just doing a box somewhere, off the coast in the Gulf. I can tell you this: we were flying planes almost 24 hours a day. It's funny because I'll hear stories from my guys on the ground. One of my friends, Chase, who's a Green Beret, was like, "Oh, I called in your Hawkeye to send a signal so all the enemy's cell phones went out in the area, and that was from my ship."
Increased efficiency in rearming, refueling, and general carry capacity means the Gerald R. Ford class carriers can perform 33% more combat sorties per day than the former Nimitz class. That's 160 combat missions daily, with the ability to surge to 220 if needed, if you really want to crunch. It's easy to look at these awesome carriers and see a floating island filled with thousands of homesick 18 to 25-year-old sailors. What most people do not understand, though, is that an aircraft carrier is not an island. It operates as part of an integrated team, and it's the carrier strike group that makes the platform deadly and resilient.
Out to sea, nothing is going to, it's the safest place to be. It might be safer than being home because you're protected all around you. You're protected by submarines. You're protected by obviously the aircraft above you. You're protected by you're the strike force. You've got all of the boats around you. Like aircraft carriers existed, from my own experience, is that we show our force everywhere in the world. Right? Like
when carriers deploy, they do so as part of a team. This consists of cruisers, destroyers, submarines, logistic vessels, even satellites and cyber packages. It's this strike group concept that keeps carriers an essential part of the military power projection. Webs of interconnected networks move, shoot, and communicate together to create a force that's far superior to any rival nation. Let me give you an example. An F-35 can launch from a carrier to conduct a multi-role mission. While miles away, its sensors intercept an anti-ship ballistic missile en route to the carrier. Instantly, these sensors share that information across all ships and fighters in the battle space. From there, a cruiser launches the interceptor missile to destroy it before it even comes within range of the carrier's own radar. Now multiply this level of information sharing across 160 combat sorties a day, satellites, and other surface and subsurface ships. Now feed all of that data into a machine learning and AI processors so that it can be managed at a reasonable level. This is the power of the carrier strike group. There's no argument against the fact that the Gerald R. Ford class carrier is an expensive investment. However, to project 5th generation aircraft, the Navy needs a new class of carriers. Engineers developed the Nimitz in 1967. To keep up with modern technology, we have to modernize the platforms that carry the technology to the fight. Carriers like the Ford are designed to communicate and integrate with a joint force. And this is what makes them truly valuable. When measuring up US Navy modernization compared to China, I want you to look at this graph here. On the far right, you can see a clear trend from 2005 to 2022 of the relative change in the number of ships between the US and China. This has led to a lot of concern, naturally, that China now has the world's largest navy. Let me tell you why this might be a wrong way of looking at it though, because first, more ships in the US Naval Command only means one thing: more targets. Second, this data is misleading. While China has more vessels, the US Navy displaces more than twice as much tonnage with ships that can go further and manage rougher waters. The USS Ford displaces 1 million tons. Damn! If employed in a conventional war against China over Taiwan, carrier air power would not likely target ground targets on the mainland China unless there was a target that a guided missile couldn't reach. Instead, aircraft launched from a carrier would likely support anti-ship missions around the strait. After coastal air defense is eliminated, fighter aircraft on board could work to interdict PLAAF fights and support forces on the ground in Taiwan and outlying contested islands. In 2023, the Center for Strategic and International Studies published the most comprehensive Taiwan wargame results available to the public. As part of their conclusion, typically the United States lost both forward deployed carriers within the first turn or two, with an average of 200 to 500 aircraft across the scenarios. This is a solemn analysis for the price that we may pay for a full-scale war in the Pacific. However, avoiding war is something carriers are also good for. By placing carrier strike groups in the South China Sea, the United States instills confidence in regional allies that international law and stability will persist. Of course, these carriers are a geopolitical tool beyond just swashbuckling around Taiwan and the South China Sea. The Earth is 70% water, and 40% of the world's population lives within 100 kilometers of the coast. This means these carriers can put a fleet of aircraft and thousands of service members within reaching distance of almost anywhere in the world. In a non-combat role, carriers can transform 160 combat sorties a day to hundreds of humanitarian and disaster response flights. A carrier based off the coast of a recent natural disaster can provide energy, food, medicine, search and rescue, internet, and communication capability, and more to the distressed area. In 2011, for example, the USS Ronald Reagan provided critical disaster relief to areas of Japan hit by an 8.9 magnitude earthquake and tsunami. As far back as 1929, the second aircraft carrier ever made, the USS Lexington supplied Tacoma, Washington with 30% of its electricity after severe droughts affected the city's hydroelectric dam. For over a century, the United States invested in ships that can carry planes and launch them wherever they sailed. For decades, they delivered both bombs and MREs to nations involved in US diplomatic efforts, cementing their iconic role as US foreign policy tools. But I want to know what you think of this new generation of aircraft carriers. Are they a valuable tool, or are they a gigantic waste of money? Let me know in the comments section down below. Thank you for watching. If you found something valuable about the aircraft carrier, please hit the like and subscribe button. As always, I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Fair winds and following seas, spare parts.